Hi, my name is Ed Kelly, and I'm a member of the First Unitarian Church here in Omaha. I'm also a chaplain and celebrant with the American Humanist Society. I'd like to spend just a few minutes, 5 to 7 minutes, talking about a few ideas that I think we should be thinking about as we enter the new year, 2023. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King gave a lecture at the annual Unitarian Conference convention in 1966. The title of his lecture was "Don't Sleep Through the Revolution." 56 years ago, Dr. King introduced the idea of a woke movement, of the importance of the church remaining awake during a revolution. He rooted his message in a short story written by Washington Irving entitled Rip Van Winkle. I'm sure you remember the story. Rip Van Winkle fell asleep when King George III was in power. And 20 years later, he woke up to discover that he had slept through the revolution and George Washington was president. Dr. King brought up the idea that there's nothing more tragic than to sleep through a revolution. And the revolution he was speaking about was the civil rights movement of the 1960s here in our country. Then Dr. King stated this, quote, "One of the greatest misfortunes of history is that all too often many individuals and institutions find themselves in a great period of change, yet fail to achieve the new attitudes and outlooks that the new situation demands," unquote. And if you're honest, and look back at the 60s, we know that many Christians, and sad to say, some Unitarians, refused to take part in the civil rights movement, and some even actively resisted it. They could not achieve the new attitudes that were needed for that period of time. Today, we are in the midst of another social revolution, a great struggle against a new kind of Jim Crow racism, voter restriction laws, reproductive injustice, homophobia, transphobia. And an idea has arisen. And the idea is not new, but it's old. But from time to time, it needs to be shouted from this church steeple. This is the idea of the worth and dignity of every human being, that all people on planet Earth have an equal claim to life, liberty, and justice. This is our dream. Dr. King, in his lecture, talked about what we need to do as the church to stay awake and remain true to the nature of the church as the moral guardian of society. I want to draw 4 keys to staying awake that I drew from his lecture. First, we must never be silent. We must challenge the status quo. The only way that racism will be eliminated, the only way homophobia, transphobia, and other kinds of injustices will be eliminated is if we challenge them. Secondly, we must broaden our horizons. And here I'm thinking of the idea of expanding freedoms. Dr. King did not limit himself to just one injustice, that of racial injustice. In his lecture, he points out the need, quote, to instill within the people of our congregations a world perspective. He spends considerable time talking about the needs of all men and mentions the principle of the brotherhood of man and the needs of the hungry and the homeless in India and Africa, while we spend billions here in this country on the military complex. We must never be satisfied till all are free. Thirdly, it goes along with the idea of not being silent. We must reaffirm over and over again publicly the essential immorality of racial discrimination, systemic racism. We must reaffirm over and over again the essential immorality of transphobia and homophobia. We must affirm over and over again the essential immorality of denying a woman's reproductive rights. Finally, To quote Dr. King, quote, "The next thing the church must do to remain awake through this revolution is to move out into the realm of social action. It is not enough for the church to work in the ideological realm and to clear up misguided ideas. No, to remain awake, the church must engage in strong action programs to get rid of the last vestiges of discrimination," unquote. Staying awake will not be easy. It will be hard work. Freedom is never an easy road, but staying awake is the key to possessing that dream that Dr. King described in his 1963 "I Have a Dream" speech when he said, "I still have a dream." It is a dream that's deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And he ends his dream speech with, "Let freedom ring." And when this happens, when we allow freedom to ring, when we bring it from every village and hamlet, state and city, we'll be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black children, black men, white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, and I am sure if he were here today, he would include the LGBTQ, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, "Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last." Thank you.